Calming myself in the silence of dawn, I watch thoughts announce themselves. Intertwined with breathing and an understanding comes. They have a life of their own. Mental problems feed on the attention given to them. A voice seems to echo in the empty space of the room. I am reminded of Annamalai Swami, whose words reverberate in my mind now. The more you worry, the stronger they become. I breathe deeply, trying to find the necessary distance, ignoring them, as Swami suggests. It's a subtle art, but how do you start this process? How can we remove the vitality from these mental shadows that seem so real? Ignore them, and they lose their power. It's a dance between observing and not getting involved, between being present and simultaneously distant. This detachment, this observational serenity, is not an escape, but an immersion in a different kind of presence. If you ignore them, they will eventually disappear. It's a strategy of non-resistance, but it requires immense energy, a kind of active passivity. I must learn to see these thoughts as strangers, fighting in the distance. It's not my dispute, not my conflict. Swami's lessons are clear, though difficult to embody. Completely lose interest in the stories told by the self, he instructs. But what are these stories? They are narratives of anxiety, of future plans, or past regrets, all woven by the same mind that seeks my attention. Incessantly, as dawn unfolds, and the first rays of light gently filter through the window, a resolution grows within me. This mind, with its incessant tales and endless dramas, doesn't need to be the center of my universe. Step away from the mountain of problems, Swami advises. Step by step, I begin to tread this path, seeking the freedom to be undisturbed by the incessant waves of thought. As the days pass, the exercise of ignoring the mind begins to reveal its complexities and nuances. There's a force within me, questioning a voice asking if detachment from thoughts would be a form of denial. Refuse to acknowledge that they are yours is the guideline echoing in my consciousness. They are not me. They are just visitors passing temporarily through the space of my being. This idea of denial is intriguing. It's not about rejection, but about recognizing that thoughts and problems, however intense they may seem, do not define my essence. I am something beyond, something deeper. Ignore the mind is the silent mantra, guiding me, an invitation to interrupt the constant flow of thoughts, simply by choosing not to feed them with my attention. Observing without engagement becomes a daily practice. Every thought that arises is like a stranger trying to start a conversation. I listen, but I do not engage. The perception that this dispute is not mine strengthens the sense of inner freedom. It's a silent struggle, a decision not to participate in the arena where thoughts fight with each other for supremacy. And with this practice, something within me begins to change the mind. Once a noisy stage of conflicts and drama begins to quiet down, rest quietly in the feeling of I am, which is consciousness. This guidance seems to come from within. There's a core of peace and immutable essence, unaffected by external turmoil. This stillness reveals a deeper truth. Everything that arises, all perceptions, are not me. Every thought, every emotion, is observed as something external, something that doesn't have the capacity to disturb the deep being that I am. I learn to divert my attention from the obstacles the mind invents, realizing them as tricks to engage me in its narrative. The peace that begins to emerge is of a different quality, not dependent on external circumstances or internal silence. It's a peace that exists simply by recognizing that I am not this mind. Every step in detachment from thought is a step toward greater freedom. an exploration of the vast terrain of consciousness. That is my true home. As the process of this identification with the mind deepens, I begin to face new challenges. Persistent thoughts about bodily needs and mundane identifications suggest that I am the body, and that I need to attend to these physical demands. Do not pay attention to ideas of I am the body, is the constant whisper I hear, reminding me that these are just another series of thoughts trying to draw my attention. Learning to recognize them when they arise, and more importantly, the ability to ignore or deny them, becomes essential. In this exercise, I discover the freedom of not being the physical body. The true essence I begin to realize does not need food, is unaffected by fatigue, nor requires worldly comforts to be complete. This reality is intensely liberating but equally challenging. Developing the ability to treat thoughts linked to bodily identity in the same way, I treat two people arguing in the distance. It's not simple. It requires constant vigilance and a firmness of purpose that sometimes seems to escape me in daily routines. Each moment of choice, where I can either yield or not to the identification with thoughts and sensations, becomes a silent battleground. In this field, the struggle is not against the thoughts themselves, but against my propensity to engage with them. Learn to ignore them resonates like a personal mantra, guiding me through the days and the temptations to return to old patterns of thought. In the stillness I begin to cultivate, there's a new awareness that I am not this mind. This conviction grows, strengthening not only through reflection, but also through direct experience. The mind, once a feared master, begins to seem more like a trickster, trying to lure me back into belief in its illusions. Asserting there is no mind, there is only consciousness, becomes a recognition not only contemplated but lived. Consciousness, vast and unwavering, allows me to observe the parade of thoughts and emotions without being swept away by them. And in that observation, I discover a peace that is undisturbed no matter what passes across the screen of the mind. As the perception of the mind, as a separate entity, solidifies, I realize that each day I am less involved with its creations. This disidentification allows me to see that all that exists is merely consciousness. This realization, deep and transformative, introduces a new dimension to my journey. As this truth deepens, a distinct vision arises that the mind with all its thoughts and emotions is like a movie projected onto the screen of consciousness. The dramas, joys, and tragedies are impermanent and superficial, while the screen itself remains untouched and pure. You can only interrupt the flow of thoughts by refusing to have any interest in them. I realize this is the essence of living consciously. In this part of the journey, I begin to practice a new kind of attention. Instead of focusing on the passing content, I concentrate on the quality of the space where these contents emerge. This space, pure consciousness, is where I feel an unshakable connection to something eternal, something beyond change. Do not allow yourself to regard anything else as real. This approach, which may initially seem negative or passive, proves to be extremely powerful by anchoring myself in this single truth. The variable aspects of life lose their power to disturb or divert. I remain rooted in the reality that only consciousness exists. This shift in focus also changes how I interact with the external world. The circumstances of life, once seen as critical or defining, are now viewed as waves that come and go. Upon the surface of a deep and still ocean, you are peace. Be that peace becomes a practice, not just a concept. Through this new perspective, I realize that the key to freedom lies not in changing the external world or perfecting the flow of thoughts, but in recognizing and continually reaffirming my true nature. You are a being, and nothing can grasp you or affect you. I now see this not as a denial, but as an affirmation of my innate freedom. The recognition that I am pure consciousness brings with it the need to cultivate inner stillness as a means of sustaining this perception. Inner stillness is the key, whispers a silent wisdom within me. It's not a forced silence, but a stillness that naturally emerges. As attachment to thoughts diminishes, the practice of maintaining that stillness becomes an act of attention and dedication every day, every moment. I invite myself to return to this fundamental serenity, gently redirecting attention from mental activities to the vastness of consciousness. In this state, the noise of the external world in the clamor of the mind becomes less penetrating. Finding this peace, however, is not the end, but a portal. Through it, the wisdom that resides inherently within each of us becomes accessible. Reside in peace, I discover, is to allow this wisdom to guide my actions and responses. It's not a passive peace, but one actively engaged and deeply aware. This new relationship with stillness also transforms my perception of time and space without the constant distraction of thoughts. Each moment expands, offering a fullness that was previously obscured by mental agitation. Be that peace, I remind myself, inviting this quality to infuse all aspects of my life. As stillness deepens, a clarity arises that illuminates both the challenges and the joys of life. The problems and worries once so dominant now present themselves as opportunities to practice and confirm my true nature. Nothing can grasp you or affect you. This truth becomes both a shield and a comfort. This practice of returning to stillness is not a withdrawal from the world, but a way of deeper and more authentic engagement by anchoring myself and consciousness. I find a stability that allows me to face life with a new perspective, where the external cannot disturb the serene inner space, as stillness becomes a constant companion. I confront one of the greatest barriers on the path to spiritual freedom, personal identity. You are not the body. You are not the mind. I repeat like a mantra. This is not just a concept, but a truth that begins to manifest in deeply tangible ways, detaching from the identity that society, my personal history, and even my own mind have constructed, is a process that demands persistence. Each layer of identification that is shed reveals a larger space of freedom. I realize that these identities are like clothes I've worn, and I can choose to wear or discard them at my discretion. In this journey, the pressures to conform to external expectations become less coercive with every thought I identify with and let pass. I become more established in the conviction that I am something beyond these ephemeral identities. Just ignore becomes a technique, not only for dealing with disruptive thoughts, but also for the labels that have been imposed on me throughout my life. By cultivating detachment, a new freedom arises. It's not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to not be defined by anything. This freedom is both liberating and challenging, as it invites me to live without the usual patterns that have delineated my existence thus far. This internal transformation also alters how I interact with others. Without the need to maintain an image or defend a status, relationships become more authentic and less transactional in my being. No longer obscured by the masks of personality, I can finally encounter others in a space of true openness. Settle into the certainty that you are the being, I advise myself, as each detachment brings with a greater clarity and a profound acceptance of my true nature. The journey of detachment is continuous and unfolding without end, that reveals not only who I am, but who I can be when free from all definitions. As I detach from identity and embrace pure awareness, the impermanence of everything around me becomes more evident and less disturbing. All that comes and goes is not you. This realization becomes an anchor in a world of constant change. Impermanence, once a source of anxiety and insecurity, is now seen as the natural nature of all things. Each day, the practice of observing impermanence plays a central role in solidifying my perception that I am something beyond the continuous flow of changes. Life events, pleasant or challenging, are accepted with equal equanimity as you are peace. Be that peace resonates within me, teaching me to remain balanced regardless of external circumstances. This equanimity towards impermanence allows for a deep release of attachment to outcomes. My commitment shifts from being about final results to being about the action itself, carried out as consciously and aligned as possible. Nothing can cling to you or affect you. I realize that this truth applies not only to thoughts and emotions, but also to everything externally that seems to define life. With this new relationship with impermanence, my response to the world becomes one of serenity. I face losses and gains, joys and sorrows, with a quiet dignity, knowing that my true essence is not shaken by these temporary fluctuations. The practice of non-reaction is a testament to my ability to remain centered regardless of external or internal provocations. I observe how certain events that once triggered immediate reactions now simply flow through me, like water, unable to disturb a rock. Nothing can cling to you or affect you. This perception strengthens me, and each situation is faced with growing serenity. This development becomes more visible in my daily interactions, whereas before, I might have been driven by impulsive emotions or frustrations. I now find space to breathe, consider, and respond from a place of calm. This change not only benefits my state of being, but also the quality of my relationships, which become more harmonious and understanding. Non-reaction, however, is not something achieved once and for all, but it is a continuous practice, a commitment to always return to awareness of my true nature, especially when temptations to react arise. Be that peace, I repeat, as a reminder that my true nature is unchanging, despite external changes. This process also teaches me about the nature of the mind and its traps. Every time I choose not to react, I am choosing not to feed the habitual patterns of thought that can lead to more suffering and confusion. It is a gradual release of the chains that bound me to reactions and old habits. In the end, cultivating non-reaction is a way of honoring my own presence and respecting my journey. With each choice not to react, I reaffirm my identity as pure consciousness, regardless of what is unfolding around me. You are the being, echoes in every decision, solidifying tranquility as my natural state. As I continue the journey, each practice, each realization builds upon the previous one, leading me to a synthesis where consciousness and existence are no longer seen as separate. You are peace. This truth becomes the foundation upon which all my life experience is built. With this foundation, I realize that existence is not something to be lived externally, but something that unfolds from the core of my own nature. This synthesis reveals to me a boundless freedom. Consciousness is not something I have or an experience I attain. It is what I am, thus. Each moment becomes an expression of consciousness. Each decision is a manifestation of inner peace. Nothing can cling to you or affect you, and this realization allows me to face life with a tranquility and strength previously unknown. From this synthesis, my life experience deepens. The small joys and great sorrows are all embraced equally, as I recognize that each of them is part of the vast tapestry of existence. At this point, the distinction between what is internal and what is external begins to fade. You are serenity, and this serenity permeates everything I am and everything I do. In this expanded state of being, challenges continue to arise, but the way I face them transforms the ability to respond from a center of common clarity, turns each interaction, each confrontation, into an opportunity to reaffirm and re-experience my true identity as pure consciousness. The practice of non-reaction and detachment from temporary identities reveals that true freedom is freedom from any condition. Be that peace, and this being becomes a continuous practice, not just a state to be achieved. This frees me to live fully, not as a passive observer, but as an active participant whose presence is itself a source of peace and stability. Finally, this synthesis between consciousness and existence is not an end, but a starting point for a deeper and more authentic life living seen, not as a series of events to be controlled or suffered, but as a continuous expression of peace becomes a living artwork. You are the being, and that being is sufficient in every breath, in every moment of silence. This truth deepens, opening new horizons for my experience of being alive.